and so it's going to be brief, of course. So the Africa Open Parliament Index, for short, the Africa OPI, is an initiative that was implemented by the Africa Parliamentary Monitoring Organizations Network, APMON. And the APMON, or the Africa Parliamentary PMOs Network, is a coalition of CSOs who monitor and engage Parliament to promote open Parliament, basically, to how to strengthen Parliament and all of that. And it involves, or it consists of, organizations representing from South Africa, so parliamentary monitoring organizations. You also have organizations representing from Kenya, that is East Africa, and then we also, that is Nzalando Trust. We also have an organization representing from South Africa, the Pan-African Parliament, that is the PAP CSOs Forum. And then we also have the African Parliamentary Press Network, which is a group of media persons reporting from Parliament. So these organizations form the apex of the Africa PMO network. And so they came together with PN Africa, of course, coordinating the activities, and also with CDD Ghana also being part of the whole thing. So the Africa OPI is a tool that seeks to measure the level of openness. Open Parliament is gaining grounds in Africa. And so we thought it wise to have a tool that would help us to measure, to assess the level of openness of Parliament across the continent. And so that is what informed this idea. That is what informed this concept. But as a first step, we thought it wise to also start with a pilot. And so this first phase of this index only measured or only assessed parliaments in West Africa. And so we measured parliaments per how they are transparent, how they engage their citizens, and how they are accountable to the public. We have three objectives of the OPI. First is to strengthen parliamentary institutions towards the advancement of parliamentary openness, and then across national parliaments and across subnational and regional parliaments, right? Again, is also to identify, compare, and exchange knowledge and best practices. So the idea is that after we've been able to use this tool, after we've been able to score parliaments and assess them, we want to tease out, or we want to bring out the experiences, the practices, the lessons that, well, perhaps some parliaments may be doing better than others, some may be doing some fantastic initiatives and all of that. What can other parliaments who are not doing well learn from them and also implement them? And then finally, the idea is to also foster collaboration between CSOs and parliaments. So after we've published this tool, the idea is for us to now use it as an advocacy tool, right? So that we can help parliaments to, co-create initiative, co-create reforms and all of that, so that these lapses or these procedures that are not working for parliaments will be able to change. And so we used the methodology we assess parliaments using 3 dimensions, right? So the first is transparency. We assess parliament, how they are transparent, and they scored 35% of the total. Again, we also use civic participation. We assess parliament by how they engage their citizens. That is also 35%. And then finally, we assess them by how accountable they are to the public. That scored 30%. And these dimensions were informed by the principles of parliamentary openness. Of course, this was also informed by other global indices and all of that we used to construct this methodology. So here you have the various indicators, the total score, and then the allocation you have. So this, as I mentioned earlier, we assessed parliaments in West Africa. And so we were able to assess 13 out of the 15 countries in West Africa. Right, so the two others that we weren't able to access were Mali and then Guinea. These two countries were not able to access them. So I'll just go ahead and share some key findings from the assessment. After the assessment overall, Ghana came on top. Ghana scored the highest, 63.3, and then Guinea-Bissau scored the lowest with 22.36. So that is basically the score that we had, the highest score and then the lowest. You realize that generally, we realized only 3 parliaments were able to score more than 50% of the total mark or the total score, which raises some alarm as to how parliaments are faring when it comes to transparency, how parliaments are faring when it comes to accountability and citizens' participation. We also realized that overall, Francophone parliaments are not faring well. And so when it counts from the least countries on the rankings, you have 3 of them making Francophone countries, right? And then when you count from the top 5, you have only 1 Francophone country, which is Benin. And we think that Francophone countries can do better or can perform well when we engage them and we help them to do that. And so quickly to go through the dimensions, the various dimensions. And so I'll just go through a few of them. When it comes to transparency, we generally realize that parliaments are fairly transparent, of course, per the scores and per the assessment that we did, they are fairly transparent, but we also realize that most of the parliaments are willing to engage civil society. They are willing to engage CSOs to work together with them to see how best they can transform some of the initiatives, or they can even co-create initiatives to work together. And at some point where CSOs have the expertise, parliaments are willing to engage them to bring the expertise on board, right? But we also realize, however, that parliaments are not leveraging technology enough, right? And especially as we are in this forum that is seeking to, promote the idea of digitalization, right? Transformation, modernization. We realize that parliaments are not using technology enough when it comes to sharing information to the public and when it comes to putting out information and putting out data out there. So that is one challenge that we identified. Again, we also identified that committees are not open. Committees are not fully open to the public, which makes it very difficult for the public to access information from the committees. Even with CSOs who want to work and help these committees, sometimes it becomes very difficult for them to have access to data, to have access to information, to engage them. When it comes to civic participation, also we realized that only 4 parliaments were able to score more than the half of the total score. So here you would have Cape Verde, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria having been able to score more than the half of the total score for civic participation, right? Yes, that is not satisfactory, even though yes, the performance comparably may seem to be okay. So what did we realize? We identified that few parliaments make public draft legislations to the public. So when they are making laws, do they put these laws out there, these bills out there for the public or for citizens to contribute? What are the avenues for citizens to contribute to these bills? We realize there are less or even no opportunity for citizens to participate in lawmaking and all of that. And then we also realized that most parliaments do not have systems and mechanisms that would help them to translate the parliamentary proceedings into the various local languages. It's one of the principles that parliaments must adhere to, that they translate their proceedings into the various local languages so that even the least citizen, even the indigenous citizens and those from deprived areas would have access or would understand what is going on in Parliament. When it comes to public accountability overall, we realized that Parliament did not perform well here. Only 2 parliaments scored more than the half mark, which is 30%, as you can see. So Cape Verde, Sierra Leone were the only 2 countries in West Africa that were able to score more than the half over here. And then we realized from this that most parliaments do not use electronic voting, right? So it's either a voice vote and all of that, but most of them do not use electronic voting, which for us, we think it's an indication that we need to do more. We need to encourage Parliament to adopt electronic voting, which makes the process very accountable, makes MPs very accountable to the public. So just a quick comparison with between Anglophone and then Francophone West Africa. Generally, overall, we realize that Francophone parliaments are less open, are not that open as compared to Anglophone parliaments. So the Anglophone here, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Gambia, Liberia, comparably to Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Niger, Togo, are more open than their Francophone counterparts. So it only press us in the back that we need to do more to ensure that Francophone parliaments are doing well. Of course, that doesn't absolve Anglophone parliaments of their performance as well. And then when it comes to Lusophone West Africa, where we had Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau also, Cape Verde did comparably well than Guinea-Bissau. Of course, Guinea-Bissau was the country that scored the lowest, and so there is much to be done for Guinea-Bissau Parliament. Averagely, transparency parliaments in West Africa are doing fairly well. And so, yes, of course, there is much to be done in there. And so we still encourage and we'll still see how best we can work with parliaments to improve their transparency. When it comes to civic participation, also fairly, they are doing well, 15.57 over there as an average. But when it comes to public accountability, all parliaments are not really doing well. And that's cause for us to look into that direction to see how we can improve that score over there too. So quickly, to finish up with this presentation, some recommendations that we want to put out there for parliaments to implement, and especially for this forum as we are discussing digitalization, we are discussing modernization. We want to recommend that parliaments leverage technology to improve information dissemination. And that is one of the best means to enhance transparency, because the more you digitalize, the more information access becomes easier, the more citizens are able to get closer to the parliament, access to information becomes very easy. And we also recommend that parliaments digitalize, of course, especially when it comes to voting. They should adopt electronic voting systems, and that is what will ensure that whatever decision that MPs take on behalf of their representatives, they are accountable to those decisions. And then finally, we would say that Parliament should continue to work with civil society and other partners, of course, to identify the challenges, the procedural challenges, the systemic challenges that they can work together and co-create reforms, open Parliament reforms to address some of these challenges that we find in our assessments with parliaments across the sub-region. So generally, this is what we did as an organization together with the Africa PMO Network, and we are very happy to share the details with anyone who is willing or who wants more information on this. Thank you very much, Louis.